The Shire's chill facade hides dark twists you won't believe. Tonight, we're diving deep into Hobbit country. The Shire might seem like a super chill place. Just rolling hills, cozy fires, and lots of food. But don't let that fool you. Hobbit history is full of awesome twists. Think unexpected heroes and surprisingly brave moments. We'll find out where these little guys came from, their weird traditions, and of course some epic stories about Bilbo, Frodo, and others who got tossed into adventure's way, bigger than they planned. From crazy battles to brutal winters when danger got way too close, the Shire's past proves even the quietest lives have incredible tales. These are just sneak peeks into the amazing history that made the Shire we love, but I think they'll bring just the right amount of magic and warmth tonight. If you dig these stories and want to help out, consider a small gift on Patreon. It keeps my little hobbit hole cozy and stocked with snacks and drinks. So grab your fave blanket, pour yourself something good, and get ready for a trip through Hobbit legends where the smallest lives make the biggest impact. Deep in Middle-earth's backstory, hobbits, also called halflings, first showed up. How they truly started is still kind of a puzzle. Their story's been half forgotten by humans and ignored by the big players. That's because hobbits were naturally humble, preferring to stay out of sight. Their early history isn't super clear in LOTR or Tolkien's other books, but from what we do know, they seem like a branch of humans who changed over ages. By the time other races found them, hobbits had already been around for ages. It's thought hobbits first appeared in eastern Middle-earth during the early Third Age. The first known hobbits lived in the wide plains by the Anduin River. They were in the shadow of the Misty Mountains and near the dark edges of Mirkwood Forest. Back then, they didn't have the culture or ways we know from the Shire. They were nomads, always moving, mostly because of other groups and changing environments. From these early hobbits, 3 different kinds emerged. These were the Harfoots, the Stewars, and the Fallowhides. Even though they had a lot in common, being hobbits and all, each group had its own traits. There were even differences in how they looked and acted, shaped by where they lived and their lives. Harfoots, the biggest group, were smaller, tougher, with darker skin and quick feet. They were perfect for the hills and woods they loved, which is why they were the first to head west, traveling through northern Eriador. In the past, they got along great with the dwarves, having lots of contact. They lived near the Misty Mountains for ages. The hobbits we know and love from stories actually mostly came from the Harfoots. Now, the Stewars were wider and stockier, often living near rivers. They looked the most like humans. They were also the only hobbits who could grow beards. They were a bit more daring and unique because they could swim, even though most hobbits feared water. The most famous Stewar was Smeagol, who later became Gollum. And finally, the Fallowhides were taller, fairer, and the most adventurous. They were the rarest type of hobbits and got along better with elves. Fallowhides loved trees and forests, were good with words and music. They preferred hunting to farming. Plus, they were more natural leaders and would often guide hobbit groups during their migrations. As the Third Age went on and Sauron's shadow grew, the hobbits started moving again. They fled west, escaping wars and the Dark Lord's evil. In those early days, they lived by hunting and gathering, moving from place to place with no real home. Around the year 1050 of the Third Age, hobbits started settling in Eriador, but each group took a different path west into these wild lands. Some crossed the Misty Mountains and went as far as the South Downs. Others ended up north of Rivendell. The Stewars settled in Swanfleet, a marshy area, but eventually fled back towards the Misty Mountains. When Angmar's power threatened Arnor, around 1601 of the Third Age, 2 Fallowhide brothers, Marco and Blanco, led many hobbits west across the Brandywine River. They found a fertile land that would become the Shire. The Shire was first given to the hobbits by the King of Arthedain. The deal was simple. They'd recognize his rule and keep outsiders from settling there. In return, hobbits could govern themselves with little interference. But the kingdom of Arnor had long since fallen. Its power weakened after the war with the Witch King. Its lands were corrupted, so from the start, hobbits lived almost entirely on their own. This freedom let them create their own unique way of life, safe from the world's troubles. This settlement was a huge step for hobbits. They started farming, building homes, and developing the culture that defined them when we meet them in the stories. The Shire was mostly peaceful, but there were a few times when trouble arose. One instance was in 2747 of the Third Age. Orcs, led by Gulfimbull, invaded the Shire. This was a shocking event for hobbits, who had never faced such danger. But then a hobbit named Bandobras took the bullroar, stepped up. In the Battle of Greenfields, Bandobras famously knocked Gulfimbull's head off with a club, sending it into a rabbit hole. That's how the game of golf was supposedly invented. The victory was a proud moment for the Shire, a rare taste of heroism in their quiet lives. Years later, in 2912, a brutal winter brought more trouble. White wolves descended from the north, roaming Eriador and sneaking into the Shire, a taste of bravery in their normal lives. Years passed. It's 2912. A brutal winter hits, bringing more problems. White wolves emerged from the north, roaming Eriador and sneaking into the Shire, when it was freezing and they had no food. The winter was brutal, and the wolves were hungry. They attacked sheep, cows, and even hobbits. Fear and starvation gripped the land. Many hobbits died that harsh winter. But the Shire always bounces back. These tough times, though rare, showed hobbits their safe corner wasn't immune to dangers outside. So the Shire was split into 4 parts: north, south, east, and west. Think of them like different neighborhoods. Each had its own towns and farms, but the Shire was pretty united by hobbit standards. Later in the Fourth Age, a few more areas were added. The East Farthing, near the Brandywine River, was the most connected. The West Farthing had Hobbiton and the more remote spots. The Shire was small and not very interesting to the big players in Middle-earth. Its size, location, and resources weren't worth much to dark powers. Even the hobbits themselves, humble and quiet, didn't draw attention from powerful kingdoms. But what really protected the Shire wasn't just its smallness. It was the secret help of the Dúnedain Rangers. These guards watched the borders, keeping the hobbits safe. Over time, though, hobbits forgot about these protectors. Most didn't even know they existed. Hobbits were deeply connected to the land. Their homes, called hobbit holes, were dug into hills and mounds. These cozy dens felt like part of the landscape, built for comfort and simplicity. But as years passed, some hobbits, especially wealthier ones, built houses above ground. Still, the hobbit style didn't really change. Round doors and windows brought in warmth. Fireplaces were central to every home, and a strong connection to the outside world. For a hobbit, a home was more than just a place to live. It was a reflection of their lifestyle, based on comfort and peace, with nature always close by. Their early culture developed slowly, becoming the lifestyle that defines hobbits for many. When the Shire was first settled, farming was key. Hobbits were amazing farmers, growing crops, brewing ale, and tending gardens with natural skill. Wheat and barley fields covered the land, and gardens bloomed everywhere. But their most famous crop was pipeweed, a plant hobbits dried and smoked. What started as a habit among hobbits soon spread. The Rangers of the North took it up, and even Gandalf loved it. You'd see him puffing away. Besides pipeweed, hobbits were known for brewing, especially in the south, where the best soil grew the finest alesh. A hobbit could proudly talk about the ale from their local pub, knowing it was unmatched anywhere. But while they were skilled farmers and brewers, what truly made hobbits special was their community spirit. They valued family, friends, and especially hospitality. They always found reasons to gather, for feasts, festivals, or just a good party. Hobbits were famous for their amazing celebrations, with endless food and drink and laughter. And in true hobbit style, their birthdays were about giving, not receiving. The birthday hobbit gave gifts on their special day. Ultimately, hobbit culture was about simple pleasures. A nice garden, good pipeweed, and friends and family. A life connected to the earth but with open hearts. Then came Bilbo Baggins. For ages, hobbits lived peacefully, untouched by major Middle-earth events. But that changed in 2941 of the Third Age. A well-off hobbit named Bilbo Baggins, who loved his quiet life in Hobbiton, was pulled into an adventure like no other. It all started when Gandalf the Wizard and a group of dwarves, led by Thorin Oakenshield, showed up at Bilbo's round, green door. They had a dangerous mission. to take back the lonely mountain from the dragon smog. To Bilbo's shock, they wanted him as their burglar. Bilbo wasn't the adventurous type. He was perfectly happy with his books, garden and cozy hobbit hole. But Gandalf had other plans. Soon, despite his protest, Bilbo was on a journey far from the safety of the Shire. Trolls, goblins, dragons, and even mysterious elves became part of his tale. But the most memorable encounter was with the strange creature Gollum. Deep beneath the misty mountains, in a dark, lost place, Bilbo found a small gold ring. It seemed ordinary but would prove to be much more. This was the One Ring. But Bilbo didn't know its true power then. To him it was just a lucky find. Yet this ring forged by Sauron was destined to change Bilbo's life and all of Middle-earth. He returned to the Shire about a year later, a richer and more experienced hobbit, having helped defeat Smaug and restore the dwarven kingdom of Erebor. But his new fame as an adventurer predictably caused a stir among the conservative hobbits. They admired his travels and wealth, but also suspected him. Despite this, and showing how much hobbits valued their peace, Bilbo's story didn't change the Shire's general isolation. Hobbits continued living as always, mostly ignoring the outside world. But Bilbo had brought back a piece of Middle-earth's dark past. The ring. The ring made its wearer invisible. Bilbo used it to escape tricky situations, but it also had a darker effect, slowly controlling him. For decades, Bilbo lived a long, seemingly peaceful life. But the ring subtly extended his life and started affecting his mind. Hobbits were naturally resistant to the ring's charm. So, Bilbo was mostly protected from its darker side for years. Still, its influence was always there. As Bilbo aged, he became more protective and secretive about it. But it held a much darker side. It slowly took over his mind. For ages, Bilbo lived a long, seemingly peaceful life. Yet, the ring subtly lengthened his life and messed with his head. See, hobbits are naturally tough against the ring's pull. This kept Bilbo mostly safe from its dark side for years. But its shadow was always there. As Bilbo got older, he got way more clingy and secretive about it. Bilbo's adventures were long done, but the outside world grew scarier. Sauron was back in Mordor by 2951. The Dark Lord was hunting for the One Ring. He had no clue a hobbit had it. So, he sent his agents the Nazgul or Ringwraiths. Yep, I've got a whole video on them if you're curious. To find it. The Shire was safe for now, but the hobbits' peaceful days were numbered. Coming to an end. Around this time, Gandalf started to think Bilbo's ring was more than it seemed. He got suspicious when Bilbo acted weird and started digging into the ring's history. History of the One Ring. Years later, Bilbo threw a huge party for his 111th birthday. He planned to leave the Shire and give the ring to his heir, Frodo Baggins. But at the last minute he chickened out. The ring's grip on him was too strong. Thanks to Gandalf's push, Bilbo reluctantly gave up the ring and left. Even Gandalf was too tempted, so the ring went to Frodo. Like Bilbo, Frodo had no idea what he was holding. But a few years later, Gandalf confirmed it. The ring Frodo had was the One Ring. He told Frodo everything, and warned him the Dark Riders were coming. The ring had to get far, far away from the Shire. So, after a super long and tough journey, Frodo and the Fellowship faced dangerous, orc-filled mines, ancient forests, creepy swamps, and a giant spider's lair. Just to name a few of the wild places they visited. They finally destroyed the ring in Mount Doom's fire. With the ring gone, Gandalf and the Eagles saved Frodo and Sam. They flew them from the Mount Doom disaster. The war was over and Middle-earth was safe. But for the hobbits, the fight wasn't truly finished. When Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin got back to the Shire, they expected it to be just as they'd left it, peaceful and untouched. Instead, Saruman had taken over and ruined it. The once charming Shire was a grim industrial mess, its spirit choked by smoke and filth. Many hobbits were forced into labor. Saruman couldn't get to Gandalf directly, so he targeted the hobbits Gandalf cared about. But the four hobbits, hardened by war, wouldn't stand for it. Led by Frodo and the others, the hobbits fought back against Saruman's forces. It was called the Scouring of the Shire. Even though it was a smaller fight, compared to the epic War of the Ring, it meant everything to the hobbits. They fought for their homes, their way of life. The Shire was saved and peace returned. The land would heal, and so would the hobbits' hearts. But not Frodo. The Shire went back to normal. But Frodo couldn't find peace. The scars ran too deep. The physical wounds from Shelob's sting, the Morgul blade, and the mental toll of the ring left him permanently changed. He couldn't find comfort in the life he once loved. In 3021 of the Third Age, Frodo was granted a special gift. A voyage to the Undying Lands. This is where elves and Middle-earth's greatest heroes lived in peace. He left the Shire behind. With Bilbo, Gandalf, Elrond and Galadriel, sailing west from the Grey Havens. He knew it meant saying goodbye to the Shire and the friends he fought to protect. But Frodo accepted. He left the Shire forever, seeking peace beyond all pain and sorrow. With Sauron and Saruman gone, and the War of the Ring over, the hobbits of the Shire went back to their quiet lives. But something had shifted. These ordinary folk had become legends. Thanks to the incredible bravery of Sam, Merry, and Pippin, these hobbits who never wanted adventure found themselves at the center of the Third Age's biggest conflict. Under the leadership of Samwise Gamgee, who had grown wiser and stronger through his travels, the hobbits set about rebuilding what was destroyed. During Saruman's brief, cruel rule. During his journey, Galadriel had given him a gift, like she did for everyone in the Fellowship. He received a small wooden box, with a silver rune on the lid. Inside was earth from Galadriel's orchard. It looked like soft fine gray dust. Mixed in was a seed like a small nut with a silver shell. With this magical earth from Galadriel, Sam planted saplings where beautiful trees had been cut down, adding a bit of the precious dust to each root. He planted the seed to grow a new party tree, which became a Malorn tree. Legend says when it bloomed the next summer, the whole Shire was bathed in golden flowers. And so this hobbit, who was once just a gardener, became a beloved figure in the Shire. He married Rosie Cotton, had 16 children, and was elected mayor 7 times. Under his gentle guidance, the Shire thrived. His friendship with Frodo remained one of the most important relationships in his life. Even after Frodo left for the Undying Lands, Sam always carried the memory of their journey. But before Frodo departed, he attended his best friend's wedding. Sam and Rosie actually moved in with Frodo at Bag End. Frodo then gave the home to Sam. Eventually, Sam joined Frodo in the Undying Lands, as he had also carried the ring, even if briefly. Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took, or Merry and Pippin, had also played huge roles in the War of the Ring. They returned to the Shire as heroes in their own right. Their time with the riders of Rohan and soldiers of Gondor changed them completely. They were no longer just mischievous pranksters. They had become warriors and leaders, respected both in the Shire and beyond. Merry became the master of Buckland, and Pippin eventually became the Thane of the Shire. These guys weren't just pranksters anymore. They'd become fighters and commanders. Everyone in the Shire and out looked up to them. Merry was now the boss of Buckland. And Pippin? He ended up as the big cheese of the Shire, a top spot in Hobbit society. They kept the Shire safe and thriving after the war. Their leadership boosted ties with Gondor and Rohan, where they'd found lifelong friends. Hobbits stayed pretty isolated but now had a quiet, strong link to the wider world. The Ent drafts changed them too. Merry and Pippin drank them and grew taller than other hobbits, a physical reminder of their big role in Middle-earth's story. For life, they protected the Shire's peace. At 102, Merry and Pippin, though old, returned to Rohan and Gondor, places they loved. Their time there was peaceful, but their long, amazing lives soon ended. Merry died later, and both were buried in Gondor with the greats. When their dear friend King Elisar Aragorn died, the 2 hobbits were buried with him, as fitting companions to the king they served and fought with. Speaking of Aragorn, as the Fourth Age began, and he took the throne, he ensured hobbits were never forgotten. His rule made the Shire officially free, safe from outside claims. Grateful for the hobbits' role in the War of the Ring, Aragorn issued a special decree. No men could enter the Shire without permission. This simple act let hobbits live in peace, away from outside issues. As Middle-earth moved on, hobbits quietly returned to their old life. Good food, great company, and cozy home vibes. They saw massive battles and dark powers fall. But their hearts still loved everyday joys. Hobbits never sought fame or power. But their part in the War of the Ring shows true heroism isn't always loud. Frodo carried an impossible weight. Sam stuck by him no matter how dark. And Merry and Pippin rose as leaders when their people needed them. Even the Shire, with its quiet strength, stood firm against all attacks. In the end, Hobbits showed the world that even the smallest among us can change everything.